Kasich and Fitzgerald try to get their own houses in order.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News, Karen Kassler, State House bureau chief for Ohio Public Radio and TV, Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Michael Miller, attorney and former Franklin County prosecutor.
John Kasich and Ed Fitzgerald are still the likely nominees of their parties in the race for governor, but it's not totally smooth sailing. Let's start with Ed Fitzgerald. The Democrat is the endorsed candidate of many in his party, but he now faces a possible primary challenge. Hamilton County Commissioner Todd Portun says he may run against Fitzgerald. He's traveling around the state, gauging support before making a final decision, he says. Portun says he was upset by the way Fitzgerald handled the brief campaign of former Lieutenant Governor candidate Eric Kearney, and he says that Fitzgerald cannot connect with African Americans in Ohio, a voting bloc that is crucial to a Democrat's success. Sam Gresham, Portun said it was appalling, the relationship that Fitzgerald has with the African American community. How do you react to that? Is it appalling, Fitzgerald's relationship?
I think that's a misplaced adjective based on what I know. I know it has not been a warm relationship, but whether it's appalling, I don't know. I think it shows from the Democratic Party standpoint, going back to Dick Celeste, which that was the last Democratic gubernatorial candidate that had an excellent relationship with the African American community in Cuyahoga County. Ted Strickland did not have a good relationship with the African American community, and in fact, in my opinion, that's the reason he lost. He lost by 2%, and the Cuyahoga people didn't come out with him. It's amazing to me that Ed Fitzgerald has this problem since he is from Cuyahoga County. But I also understand the politics of Cuyahoga County and the county executive. When all that was put together, there were some African Americans on the different side of that whole issue. He kind of split that community. And I don't think he ever healed those wounds to the point where it'll make him a strong gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats.
So Democrats knew this was a problem because of Ted Strickland's issues. Why is it still a problem? Why haven't they found a candidate or worked with Fitzgerald to have him improve this relationship?
Well, maybe they haven't really recognized that it is that much of a problem. Maybe they've underplayed it. It's sort of like I think they thought, well, we can pick Eric Kearney, and if they knew about the taxes and the tax problems, they certainly underestimated what kind of an issue it would be. Maybe this is another instance where they've underestimated how much of an issue it is.
Is Todd Portun for real?
I don't know. I'm going to talk to him next week for our TV show, try to ask him that question. There's a lot of questions about him and suggestions that he's done this sort of thing before, that he's tried to draw attention to himself and get into races and then at the last minute backed out. But if he is going into this race, he doesn't have a whole lot of time. And this is different than, say, the GOP primary where you had the Tea Party candidate, Ted Steveno, who said he was going to run, then backed out. That looked like it was intended to be more of a spoiler thing. Todd Portun sounds like he really wants to beat Ed Fitzgerald, but I don't know how you do that in 5 months when, sure, not a lot of people know who Ed Fitzgerald is statewide, but probably even fewer know who Todd Portun is.
He's got the money already. He's been raising money. He has money in his war chest, and Todd Portun is basically starting from scratch. Republicans have to be just sitting back and enjoying this little intra-party squabble, right, Mike?
Well, sure you enjoy it, but Portun, who I don't know, but he's been around a long time. I think he's been a commissioner 13 years in what used to be, anyway, a Republican county, and he's been around quite a while. But I cannot believe that this is for real. I mean, everything I have seen, the Democrats as an organized group are solidly sticking with Fitzgerald, and I would think that if Portun actually runs, the Democrats will want to take really going to penalize him somewhere down the road. I think his chances of winning are very, very minute, and for him to actually do it, he's going to be risking a lot of political capital. And I don't think he'll do it.
There's been some suggestion that he might be doing this to draw attention to him or to another candidate in the Southwest Ohio area. And it's an interesting strategy, though, to essentially anger the party because the party has said they're firmly behind Ed Fitzgerald, and to try to draw attention, positive attention that way.
There's also Chris Redfern and Todd Portune have not gotten along. Is he running against Ed Fitzgerald, or is he running against Chris Redfern and the party establishment? Chris Redfern, the Democratic Party chair.
That could be a part of the whole. There's a lot of inter-party squabbling, both parties going on right now. You would call them schizoid and paranoid. I don't know which is more definitive. But I think Redfern is an issue across the party, and I think if he loses another gubernatorial race, there'll be rumors of movement. Now, the issue of the African American community, I've spoken to on this show for at least 4 or 5 years, and I've had some people come and chastise me for that, and I've said to them, then prove me wrong. Get somebody to win. Put some money behind it. Nina Turner's up. See what you can do. I go all the way back to I go all the way back to the current state senator from Columbus. What's her name?
Charlie Tavares.
Charlie Tavares. When she ran for Secretary of State, they left that woman out there. Kevin Borkin. You want me to go back and say some more people? They left them out there. They didn't give them type of support.
Barack Obama won twice.
Right. And no black candidate could win in the state of Ohio. What does that say?
So
No black Democratic candidate. Republicans have elected black candidates.
Yeah,
statewide.
they've done it 4 times. And I stick that in my face of my Democratic friends, too.
I think there is some history with Portune and Redfern. Portune wanted to be the ODP chairman and backed out and backed I think, Steve Reese, that is his name?
Correct.
Who then lost to Redfern. So I think there's some history there, and I don't see how Portune's going to be able to collect all the signatures and overcome the fact that the party has already endorsed Fitzgerald, and that extends to all the local parties as well.
Here's a far-fetched question. Any chance that Portune could be a running mate? They could say, you know, he brings Southwest Ohio, he brings some experience, I appreciate his criticism.
He
There's
doesn't, I
bad
don't think
blood there.
he doesn't bring the racial diversity. He brings the geographical diversity.
And he also has a history of a gadfly. He's never, there are a lot of things he's talked about, but he's never done. He hasn't completed whatever he said he was going to do. And I think that has a tinge of being, you know, kind of off the wire, not serious, you know, kind of Palin-esque.
If he wanted to be the lieutenant governor candidate, then this is not the best way to go about it.
About doing
Yeah, just throwing it out there as a possibility because of the geographic diversity. But you're right, Karen. There is a real need probably for either gender diversity or racial diversity on the ticket.
Agreed.
As of right now, Governor Kasich does not face a primary opponent. Tea Party activist Ted Stevenow, as Karen mentioned, had planned to launch a primary challenge, saying Kasich failed conservatives when he expanded Medicaid and proposed higher taxes on oil and gas drillers. Stevenow's bid hit an immediate bump when it came out that his chosen running mate, Brenda Mack, owed back taxes. Stevenow says that's not the reason he canceled his campaign announcement. He said he cited personal reasons right now in his life. Michael Miller, how dissatisfied are some Republicans with John Kasich?
Well, I think some Republicans are basically Tea Party people, and certainly not all of them, but there's obviously a chunk of them that are, because they are, unlike the problem with the Democrats that we just discussed, a purist. I mean, they want somebody to be 100% in line with them, and if they're not, they're going to jump ship. It's really hard for me to fathom how they do that when they realize that if they do and take enough votes from the governor, they're going to guarantee a Democrat governor, which they don't want, but apparently it doesn't make any difference to them. If you're not 100% pure and with us, then you're against it. We're against you. So I don't think there's a lot of them, but particularly if the libertarians get in and a lot of people go that way, it could have an effect. I think this fellow did it. As I understand it, Tea Party looked for a number of people to run against the governor. Couldn't find anybody. And then this guy agreed to do it and for some reason pulled out. Whether it had anything to do with anything was running mate or not, I don't know. But he wouldn't have gotten many votes to begin with.
I'm going to be talking to Tom Zawistowski from the Portage County Tea Party, arguably the most visible Tea Party leader in Ohio, also next week for our TV show. And I plan to ask him if there's anybody else in the wings. I mean, certainly there's a lot of frustration. There was a Tea Party convention in September here in Columbus where a lot of Tea Party activists, about 300 were here, and they were very upset about Medicaid expansion, said they were going to work actively against John Kasich, even though they had worked for him in the last election. And they said they'd rather have a Democrat when you've got a Republican-controlled legislature, because then the Democrat won't be able to do anything. And so it's an interesting dynamic that's being set up here. Certainly a Tea Party candidate in a primary wouldn't be a winner, but could be enough to beat up Kasich going into the fall vote that it could be damaging potentially.
Does it illustrate the strength or the weakness, lack of strength, the weakness of the Tea Party in Ohio, that they can't get a candidate?
I think it's a factor of two things. Complete control. When you have all three houses, the governor, the Senate, and the House, whatever party he is, they tend to be infighting. When they have absolute control, they fight each other over minor things. So this is a part of the factor. But the story down in the bottom, I don't understand. Nobody's really talking about this. In most of the polls, Kasich is at best 7 points ahead or even. For an incumbent governor, that's a problem. At this early stage, I would expect you would be 55% of the vote and descending going towards November. But to be only 7 points apart or at best even, I think that sounds a problem. I think Mike is right. If it's that close right now, and if somebody else gets in the water to mix into that water, that could cause a serious problem for his candidate.
But the 2010 election, Strickland and Kasich were only 2 points
That's
apart
right,
at the end.
right.
I think this, in spite of the fact that Republicans do control the legislature and the governor's office and the Supreme Court and everything else, this is really a close state, and we saw that even in 2012 and with Obama and Sherrod Brown both winning.
But the good news today, Friday, as a matter of fact, Laura, was the announcement that the GM plant near Dayton is getting a brand new company, Chinese company, 800 jobs. Not the 4,000 used to work there, but 800 jobs that's more than a few.
That's right, and I think this is one of the biggest economic development win, the biggest economic development win for John Kasich in his term in office. 800 jobs, and it's a $200 million investment from a completely outside, brand new to Ohio company. So this is something people have even said, well, maybe this is the beginning of what Honda was a long time ago, that this company will move in and blossom into something that's really enormous. They're going to use 1.5 million square feet of a 4 million square foot plant that had been headed for demolition.
So that's what it will come to, and that's what Republicans have to hang their head on. The economy at least picks up a little bit. Better than it was in 2009, but still not great.
Well, the economy, you know how that goes, Mike. It depends. If it's doing good, the president takes the credit for it, and the Democrats point to the president. If it's doing bad, they point to Kasich. I mean, that's just politics the way it always is.
I thought it was vice versa, Mike.
But it is, Sam. It's both ways.
It'd be great. It's okay. It's all my fault. I'll do better next time. The lack of a primary opponent does not mean, as has been alluded to here, does not mean that John Kasich is off the hook when it comes to libertarian-minded or far-right conservatives. He still could lose some of those votes to a minor party candidate. And this week, in a blow to establishment Republicans, a judge ruled that libertarians and other minor parties do not have to meet new requirements to get on the ballot this fall. Laura Bischoff, the state is going to appeal this ruling, but as of right now, the minor party candidates need 500 signatures and they're on. Right. What does this mean for John Kasich?
Well, it means that Charlie Earl, who's the Libertarian Party candidate, is going to get on the ballot. And I think that maybe the only backers bigger than the Libertarian Party of Charlie Earl is the Ohio Democratic Party, because they really want to have a third party candidate who will peel votes away from Kasich and make it closer. They did a poll commissioned by the Ohio Democratic Party by PPP that showed that if you match Fitzgerald against Kasich with Charlie Earl in the mix, Earl gets, 6% of the vote, and it's tied between them. So, it can change the dynamic.
Which is extraordinary. I mean, for a libertarian candidate to get 6% of the vote in Ohio would be pretty, at least recently, historic. I think the last one, the highest number that I've seen, is about 2.3, 2.4%. So if Charlie Earl can pick off 6 percentage points, that's a big deal. And certainly it would eat into Governor Kasich's lead, I would think, if he were leading.
This ruling also appeals to the Socialist Party, the Constitution Party, the Green Party. So those parties would also make it on.
And the judge basically said that the legislature, the Democrats called this bill the John Kasich Re-Election Protection Act. And the judge said, you can make these rule changes, but you can't do it so close to an election So
Well, the argument had been that there were so many confusing rules out there with regard to third-party candidates that we needed to come up with a law that would address all of them and make it right now. That's what the argument was, why this should happen right now. And of course, Democrats didn't exactly buy that, hence the John Kasich Re-election Protection Act.
There is no law on this right now. It's all based on Secretary of State directives.
But she makes the point again, and I love that poll you just point, how fragile John Kasich's candidacy is. I mean, these polls point out he is not the strong head. He's not leading. He is not.
But he's not been campaigning, right, Mike? I mean, the campaign hasn't started yet.
Wait till he's
He's
not
having,
spending money,
it's
right?
a long time to go. I'm not worried about these polls at all. I will disagree with one thing Laura said when she said that the Democratic Party behind the Libertarian Party is the happiest people with this decision by Judge Watson. I think the Democratic Party is first. And the Libertarian Party is second. They are thrilled with it.
But realistically, is Charlie Earl going to be able to raise enough money to get that 6%? I think early polls in a lot of races, you see the Libertarian candidate get 6-7%, and as we get closer to Election Day, it gets closer to 2 or 3.
3%.
It's a true protest vote. But
It
can
is.
he maintain that? Does he have the resources to
I think
maintain
the
that?
Libertarian got more, got a better chunk in the Mandel Brown race, which is sort of indicative of that. Maybe there's a bigger protest group. And if Stevenow is not going to be in it, if the Tea Party doesn't have their guy in there, I think a lot of the Tea Party people who might have voted with Stevenow in the primary and then Kasich in the general, there'll be a slice of them that will just say, okay, I'm going to do my protest in November. Most of them, I think, will come home to Kasich.
Well, the governor's not just going to write these folks off, the far right. What can he do, Michael, to get them back, to win back their favor, win their vote?
Well, I wish I had an answer to that. I don't know that I do, Mike, but one thing he's just got to show, the governor's been a very conservative person, and I think the Tea Party probably agrees with him on 90% of the things he's done. And just to argue common sense to it, you throw this away, you're going to get somebody in who's going to agree with you 30% of the time. It's foolish. And just appeal to their common sense. But as I say, many of them are purists, and I doubt if that will work, but I think that's what he's going to try.
You know, there's a group of people, and if you look at the legislative process, how the things against women were plugged in to the budget bill, and people look back on those things. There's a group out there that I think he's trying to appeal to, and that's Blue Dog Democrats. Those are people who, by definition, are by where they register are Democrats, but in ideology they are conservative Republicans. And I think he's been trying to walk that tightrope to try and get some of those people to come with him. His efforts to go up into Cleveland and the surrounding areas to shake hands, where typically Republican candidates haven't gone into the Democratic stronghold. So I think he's trying to peel some of those people off.
I think he's trying to go for the African-American vote up in Cleveland too, Sam. I mean, obviously he's not going to get it, but I think he's made some inroads there. He's developed a relationship with the mayor up there and some other people, and I think he's going to do better than perhaps most Republican gubernatorial candidates do up there. And if he does, that's bad news for the Democrats.
For Fitzgerald.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, will be an issue nationally in 2014. We'll be seeing a lot of national stories of governors and congressional candidates, senatorial candidates having to defend or folks attacking it. So it's not going to go away. So is John Kasich in a bind and he has to defend his expansion of Medicaid, which is a major component of it, or does he ignore it? How does he play this? Because it plays well with independents, but not with the far right.
I think that he continues to play it as, first off, divorcing it from Obamacare and just saying it's this Medicaid expansion, and that it's a compassionate thing to do for the least among us, and to sort of say he's a compassionate conservative on it. I think he tries to mitigate it just in sort of the semantics around it.
I think there are signals being sent by recent legislative activities. One was the expansion of the Unemployment Act. The one before that was the budget bill, where everybody negotiated on it. I think the Republicans are moving in a different direction, particularly for the election year. They don't want to be seen as the party of no. They want to be more productive. I think as a strategy in Ohio, Republicans are going to try and divorce themselves from the national Republicans and try and go that middle road, and I'll repeat, try and get some of those Blue Dog Democrats to get on their boat.
And the Chamber of Commerce has announced they're going to help mainstream Republicans fend off primary challenges. It doesn't look like there's going to be any real primary challenges here, but you could see them come in and defend against a libertarian challenge, Karen, if
Certainly.
that pops up in the fall.
And the Chamber of Commerce broke a long-standing tradition last time around by endorsing John Kasich. He did his year-end presentation this year in front of members of the Chamber of Commerce. They're very close, the governor and the members of the Chamber of Commerce, so I could see them getting involved.
Okay. Our last topic, the fracking tax is back. John Kasich, for more than a year, has been trying to convince lawmakers to impose a new severance tax on oil and natural gas drillers. Kasich points out that Ohio is way behind other states in benefiting from the oil and gas boom, at least as far as taxes are concerned. The drillers opposed this idea, as did the Republican legislature, so now there is a compromise. So, Karen Castle, this really is just splitting the difference. Kasich didn't get all he wants, but he's going to get some.
I don't know that it's a compromise. I mean, this bill would, whereas Kasich wanted, and it's not apples and oranges here, but let's just, generally, he wanted a 1.5% tax on oil and gas drillers going up to 4%. This one will be a 1% tax going up to 2%. And when I say going up, that means when it gets to the point of highest level of production. And so it's less than what Kasich wanted. And he said at that year-end presentation that this is not what he wanted. It's not enough. And he's also said that he fears that if there is not what he called a reasonable severance tax proposal put into place, that there would be a group which would come and put it before voters on the ballot. And so I'm not sure that this is a done deal yet. I mean, certainly the industry supports it. Republican lawmakers who dominate both House and Senate, they put this together. But I'm just not sure where Kasich stands on it and how he's going to see it if it goes through, once it goes through.
Also, I think that the Legislative Service Commission fiscal note on this shows that it's going to cost a lot of money. It'll raise some, but there's breaks built into it for the Ohio drillers, so that actually it's going to end up costing. It'll be a net tax loss rather than increase.
And it raises $1.7 billion over 10 years, which, there'd been talk about that money being used to offset, not only to create regulatory structures and put regulators in and close off old wells and that sort of thing, but also to put in for income tax reduction. And that's not a lot of money over 10 years to use in all those many areas.
So are we just trying to get this off the stage, try to work out a deal to
members
in
of
January of 2014 say, okay, this is done, we're not going to fight this anymore? Because it is a hot button issue.
I would agree with you. We don't want this going into election to be a major issue that's contested within the Republican Party. I would agree. I would agree with you, and I'd use another word, it's capitulation. This is not a compromise because he wanted considerably more than what they are giving him. I think also this is a piece of legacy that 10 or 15 years from now, the Republican Party is really going to be sorry for what they've engaged in when all the environmental issues started floating around. And I think there was a furor and it just dissipated. But we'll see.
Does this hurt, if this does pass, Michael, does this hurt the I didn't raise taxes pledge that Republicans can make, or is this
Well, I didn't think
voters
so
don't
until
care?
what Laura said. I'm not sure if it actually is a loss.
Well, there's
Tax
already
revenue.
the argument that Kasich's budget increased the state sales tax, and so he can't make that claim even now.
No, but it's
argument
the
to be
income tax that he cares about, obviously. It's not the sales tax.
If it does come revenue neutral, that satisfies Grover Nordquist and those folks who would say if you're going to raise taxes, you got to cut it someplace else.
Yep,
So.
that's what he says.
All right, let's get to our weekly off the record parting shots, and we'll start with Michael Miller.
Well, we just went through a terrible few days of weather and cold and 15 below and all that kind of stuff. A bad time. And my son-in-law called me yesterday and said, just keep this in mind. We got 35 days till pitchers and catchers report. So that's the good
Baseball.
news.
Weather permitting, of course. Sam.
Jim Tressel will not become the coach of the Cleveland Browns.
Oh.
Jim Tressel will not become the president of Akron University.
Where's he going?
He's going to stay in the job he's got and wait for his 5 years are over and go back into coaching.
All right. Karen.
Well, Mike stole my thunder here. It's Pitchers and Catchers Report, Cleveland Indians Pitchers and Catchers Report, I believe, a month from Saturday. February 11th. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, we're waiting for the next big event, I think, at the State House, the State of the State. It's the annual. When is the State of the State going to be? I'm predicting late February. And where is the State of the State going to be? That's going to be the real issue. And I think there's a lot of folks who are trying to place their bets to figure out where it's going to be, what part of the state Governor Kasich's going to take it to.
You're rooting for Put-in-Bay, correct?
Oh, Put-in-Bay. Sure, middle of Lake Erie. Let's take a boat out there. That'd be lovely.
Yes. Laura.
I'm just going to say that we're going to hear a lot more about these 800 jobs in Dayton, and who knows, maybe the State of the State address will be in that plant in Dayton.
There would be a little bit of room.
There'd be plenty of room.
Yes.
My final thought is the cold weather was perfect for OSU this week because this was the first week in which the university really started to enforce its smoking ban everywhere on campus, including outside. So not only was the campus closed for 2 days, but with temperatures at -6, there weren't a lot of people out on the sidewalk or on the loading dock smoking away. So the weather probably did more to reduce smoking at OSU than their new policy, but we'll see. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the discussion online. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can see all of our episodes at our website, wosu.org/COTR. So for our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.